Hello all, and welcome to Texas, the series where I review and comment on each installment in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre saga. On tonight's episode, we're taking on Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3. Now, it should be noted that I've seen the unrated cut. I have it on DVD. It has both options, both unrated and rated. Whenever I'm given both options, the version I'm always going to see is the unrated because it was the cut originally intended by the filmmakers. Why in the world would I go with the rated when I have the unrated right there? It just doesn't make any sense. So yes, I've only seen the unrated cut. I haven't seen the rated cut. I'm commenting on that. Anyways, this film's plot, there's not much to talk about with the plot. It's actually just supposed to be a reboot of the series after Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 added its comedy elements and kind of went in this oddball direction. They decided to try and bring the series back to its roots, and thus they felt they had to do a reboot, as it were. So this is very much a remake. It has the exact same plot as the original. A lot of the same stuff happens. It's a remake. It's just a remake more in the sense of The Fly or The Thing. It brings its own thing to the table instead of redoing the original step by step. But it's still a remake. It's called Texas Chainsaw Massacre Part 3, but it's still a remake. It's still the plot from the original all over again. Some people in a car get lost, they end up at the Campbell's home, and they get killed off one by one. And one of them is a woman that runs around screaming her heads off and is forced to eat with the Campbells. It's the same story again. This one, though, is spiced up a bit because the hero characters are quite different from the hero characters we've seen before. One is a survivalist who's a very interesting character by the name of Benny. He's probably the biggest badass in the series. Also, the Campbells are extremely different. None of them feel like retreads of the Campbells we've seen before. All of them are very different than the Campbells we've seen before. Tex, for example, is a very interesting Campbell because he acts so normal. He could really fit in well, so you could see how they could function in the real world. And also, there's this little kid cannibal who's just this little girl, so you get the idea of how they're raised and trained to be killing machines, how it becomes like a generational thing, which is a really interesting idea. The idea that they've probably been doing this for eons and eons and they're all born into it. So we get some sense of that by having a child cannibal, which I really liked, even though she doesn't really add very much to the film. So it was different because of that. Also, an element that made this film really good in my book is once the plot gets started, once the action gets started, it never stops. It's kind of like a really quick roller coaster ride. Once the plot gets started, it just goes and goes and goes and goes, and it never lets up. It kind of reminded me of Mad Max Fury Road. You know, once the action in that got started, it didn't stop for anything. Once this movie gets started, it doesn't stop for anything. Everything's very quick. Everything. Like, people get killed up, but they die off quickly. Set pieces happen, but it's very quick. It's all done to a very quick, breakneck pace. And this very quick pace makes the film feel like very hyperactive and very intense. And it really, the pace really helped the film a lot. I also liked how it still had one or two comedy elements, but mostly dropped the comedy, which I think works a lot better for this series. It should be noted also that Leatherface in this gets a brand new chainsaw, and it's like the biggest chainsaw ever. But he barely uses it. It's almost a pointless prop, but it's still cool. It's still cool seeing that. As for Leatherface himself, unfortunately, the character's even more downgraded here. So not only does he not act animalistic anymore, and not only does he only wear one human mask and thus act in one way and doesn't adapt different personalities. Now he's really just a killing machine. He's slowly and nimbly morphing into a silent killer, kind of like Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers. He's becoming less and less unique like he was in the original. And there was one scene in this film where it became really clear that the filmmakers did not get what Leatherface was supposed to be and what he was supposed to stand for. And that scene is when one of the cannibals takes Leatherface's Walkman and meaningfully throws it into the oven and it starts cooking, and Leatherface grabs the guy and forces the guy to pull the Walkman out and burn his hands. Now keep in mind that the guy has a fake hand, so the guy could have grabbed it with his fake hand and been just fine. But Leatherface forces him not to do this, forces him to use his real hand and grab it with his real hand and thus get burned. In essence, Leatherface is purposely harming someone. Now, in my past reviews, I pointed out how Leatherface is animalistic, and it could be argued that he was raised and trained to kill people, which would suggest he has no concept of what he's doing. He doesn't know he's actually doing something bad. He thinks he's just getting food to eat for his family, and it's arguably a good thing. That's what he thinks. In essence, he doesn't do things that are malicious. He does things that he thinks have to be done. He gets food for his family. This is an instance of Leatherface purposely being malicious, purposely causing harm, purposely doing harm to someone who he knows and who he trusts and who he likes, but he's upset at them, so he decides to hurt them. This is Leatherface purposely being bad. So I don't like that. I like the idea of Leatherface arguably being bad and being like a chaotic being who kills because he doesn't know any better. This is a character who does know better but decides to hurt anyways and is being purposely malicious and evil. So that whole scene in itself really shows off that the filmmakers didn't really get what Leatherface was originally intended to be. So that scene kind of hurts the film a bit, and how Leatherface is treated kind of hurts the character a bit. But since Leatherface was only acting in his interesting way in the original film, I guess you could say it's all personal preference. If you like this version of Leatherface better, good for you. But still, even if you don't like that version of Leatherface, there's still a lot to like here, like the breakneck pace, like the other cannibals are all very interesting. Benny, one of our hero characters, is a wonderful, awesome character. This guy, big spoilers, takes a chainsaw to the head, lives, has a massive gash in his head, and doesn't go to the hospital and is completely fine. I realized that got edited in as the last moment because they realized the character was so cool they couldn't kill him off. But still, that is just so epically awesome. I wish Benny could come back because he is such an awesome, kick-ass character in the series. Like, he's freaking awesome. I think he kills like 3 or 4 cannibals. Like, he's an awesome character. I wish they could have brought him back. Sadly, they did not. So all those elements are very good elements. Now, I guess I can't do this review properly if I don't talk about the censorship. This movie went into the MPAA and they were very harsh on it, and it was beginning that time in Hollywood where everyone started to realize that if you released a movie that was NC-17, you weren't going to make a dime. Every movie had to be R at the worst, and as a result, this movie got heavily cut. I thought the cuts were silly. There was plenty of horror films at the time that were just as violent as this, even more so violent. So the idea of this being heavily edited is a bit silly. And this wasn't even the only movie this was done to. It was also done to My Bloody Valentine and Friday the 13th, parts 7 and 8, I do believe. So a lot of movies had to cut out their material so they could get R, so they could get into theaters. And to be honest and frank, it was completely ridiculous. The MPAA was a joke then, and it's still a bit of a joke now. So yeah, because of that, I do notice sometimes some horror fans are a bit wary of censorship, and rightfully so. This was edited. Of course, I don't know how edited because I haven't seen the original rated version. I've only seen the unrated, which didn't seem too edited, but still, I get the whole mentality that this film was done wrong. So if you can see it, watch the unrated version, because that's apparently the really, really good one. Apparently the rated one is so cut up, it's a little bit hard to follow, which sucks. I'm not going to argue anything. The MPAA just sucks. Big time. So yeah, if you want a Texas Chainsaw Massacre that has a bit of a faster pace, it almost feels almost like an action movie because it has such a fast pace. This is the one to go with. It has great Campbells in it. It has great hero characters in it. It has a really fast and nice pace. So overall, it's a pretty good movie. Stating all that, though, there's no real standout elements. There's nothing that makes it phenomenal. Just a lot of things that make it pretty good. So overall, I would give it a 7 out of 10 and say it's worth watching. If you're going to watch all the other ones anyways, might as well watch this one too. Just watch the unrated cut. I've heard bad things about the rated. So I hope you enjoy it. And next time we're taking on the controversial Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4. What will I think of that sucker? We'll find out next time.